اینجا موزه دریانوردی
Well, I know like, well, outside we'll live later, but we got a bunch of whole bunch of pictures and all that. And we had to take one picture. These ones here, RCSCC, what that is Royal Canadian Sea Cadet Corps, that's where the considered cadets. And NLCC is Navy League. A friend of mine who was in cadets, and he told me that, what was it, sea cadets were sea puppies and Navy League cadets, right?
ماکت های مختلفه.
Well, these are just name of the cadet corps. Oh, okay. Yeah. Like, one thing about HMCS, like this building here is HMCS Chippewa, right? This is the Naval Reserve Training Establishment. This is considered a ship in the Canadian Navy. Yeah. I mean, the old joke was there's stone frigates that won't float, but because this is a training establishment, considered a ship. As a matter of fact, I don't know if you know, when you came in the second door there, you notice the brass strip on the floor? Okay. Well, if you were in the Navy and you're wearing a uniform, you would salute there, just as as if you're coming up the gangway on a ship. Right? It's a mark of respect for a king and your ship. Anyway, so this is the old, this is an officer's uniform, the old blue uniform. It's copied directly from the other side, and two you'd roll off the stern. You used to sink down in the water, and on the end there was a pressure switch. Because now the further down in the water you go, the higher the pressure is. So now by adjusting that pressure switch, you can set the depth where this will explode, right? And I always tell people, have you guys ever heard that old saying, close only counts in horseshoes and hand grenades? Well, it counts in depth charges too. If this goes off close to the submarine, the impact of the whatever, it can damage it. And of course, the submarine's an enclosed pressure vessel, so if all you need to do is damage it, you might force it to the surface, because if they're taken on water, that's obviously a problem for the crew. So anyway, so depth charges. So how do you find these submarines? Well, these ships were equipped with a type of sonar called ASDIC. And what that is basically is that you have a device, an ASDIC set, and you set up a sound wave, and it hits something, bounce off it, it comes back, and you hear a ping in your headphones to let you know. Now, by looking at your thing, you know what direction it is, and by how long it takes, you know how far away it is, right? So now you contact the bridge. I've got a contact, sir. We think it's a submarine, whatever. So you go tracking it, goes towards it. When you pass directly over it, you drop the depth charge on it, right? Hopefully you damage or destroy it. Now, the only problem with that ASDIC set is when you pass directly over the ship, you lose contact. So what they tried to do, if there's enough ships available, they would have two ships, one attacking, the other one sitting off to the side, just monitoring where it was going. If they didn't have that available, oh well, you did the best you could. So later on, they came up with an alternate weapon. These are called hedgehogs. Okay, we've got two of them here. Now on the ship, these little black devices there, that's a bunch of hedgehogs. So what they were basically is anti-submarine mortars. So when you're approaching the ship, same scenario, when you're just coming up to the ship, you shoot these all up, they would fall into the water, go down. Now these are a little different. These have to have direct contact to explode. That's why there's a little protective cover on this one. You'd take that off if you're firing. So apparently, if 2 to 3 of those hit the U-boat directly and exploded, you could do some damage. So, a few people have asked me, well, what if I was swimming in the ocean and I found one of these? I said, well, if you found one of these, that's kind of unlikely, because in the middle of the ocean, you know, it's like 5 or 7 miles deep, so you're probably not going to be down that far. But if you ever find one, don't hit it on the top with the hammer. It could go very badly with you. But anyway, so a little safety thing there. But anyway, so that was.
Would it be enough to explode if it hit the bottom of the ocean?
Well, I suppose. I guess it depends on how hard it was or whatever. Yeah, and yeah, I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of them sitting down there with a lot of ships and a lot of men sitting down there too. But anyway, so I always like to show people that picture on the wall there. Now that's Bedford Basin, which is right next to Halifax Harbor. That's a typical convoy right there. All those ships are just waiting for their naval escort to go across to England.
So that would all be like merchant ships.
Yeah.
And they had basically, there was two types of convoys. There was the HX, or fast convoys, which go over 10 to 12 knots, and the SC convoys, which were the slow convoys, which would go to 5 to 6 knots. And in most cases, the Canadians got the SC convoys, so it would take almost 2 weeks to get across to England, because there was they were using a bunch of really old, worn out, tired merchant ships, freighters. A lot of them were coal-fired, which was terrible because, of course, they make a lot of smoke and whatever, and you could see that from a long way away, which is the worst thing. So, what was I gonna say? Yeah, for a convoy, I mean, you try to avoid the meeting up with a submarine, but the way the German Navy did it, they had submarines spread out all over the Atlantic, right? And what would happen if a submarine saw a convoy? The first thing they do, rather than attack, they'd report back to headquarters, right? They would report to headquarters, they'd let them know the exact location of where it was, and what they do would contact the whole pile of the other U-boats, and they'd form what they call a wolf pack. And they would come in to attack the convoy with 8 to 10, 12 submarines. There was one situation at the beginning of the war where we had a convoy and we were short on ships. I think the convoy was protected by 4 corvettes and a destroyer. And considering, of course, these are guys with not a lot of sea time, not a lot of experience. The early ships didn't have radar. They didn't have real good equipment. There were some of the ships, actually, very early on, that 4-inch gun, they were initially launched and they went to sea with a wooden gun because they didn't have a real gun to give them. But anyway, so needless to say, with that small group of escorts and all the submarines, it went very poorly. But later on in the war, our equipment got better, our training got better, our experience got better, and by the end of World War II, we had some of the best sub-hunters in the world.
Hey, Paul, I heard you mention this photo. I had a question about it. I was
Okay.
just in Halifax with the Navy this weekend. Do you know why all the ships are pointed in the same direction? My guess was they had a single anchor line, and the wind might have pushed them all the same direction.
That makes
Or are
sense.
they parked that way?
That's a good
Yeah.
question, Maybe a practice, because I guess, like when they go to sea, then they're all in lines and rows or whatever.
Yeah.
But I would suspect it's just the way the wind's blowing and with the anchors, yeah.
You'd see which way the wind blew, because there's one cool one up there.
Yeah, you can see, that's right, so they would have the
Oh,
bow,
yeah,
anchor
you're
on
right.
the bow, off the bow, so that would be swing around that way, and like you say, the smoke's going that way, so it makes sense.
I would have just assumed, because that's the way they were heading out.
Yeah, yeah.
And, they're all facing the same.
So, in the unlikely event, or the event that you got attacked and you might have been hit by a torpedo and sank, that was a bad business, because in the North Atlantic, the water's very cold, particularly in the wintertime. If you're in the water and you're wet, your life expectancy is in hours. So, what you want to do is get out in the water onto a Carly float like this. This looks like an inflatable boat. It's not. It's made out of cork. You could shoot a rifle bolt through there. It wouldn't affect the boat. And anyway, you want to get out of the water, because if you stay in the water, you're not going to make it. Somebody was asking me, how many people can you get on one of those? As many as will fit. Now here's a couple of the Carly floats here on a Corvette. Now the other important thing would be, if that bad situation happened, then you hope like hell that the radio operator got your position away, because the North Atlantic's a pretty big place. There was one convoy, it was a mixed Canadian and British escort, and the Germans had just brought in acoustic torpedoes. And the way they worked, they'd shoot them out of the submarine, they homed in on the noise of the engines and propellers. They were deadly. So our side, we didn't know about it at the time. It was a brand new thing. So what was it, the first day, there was a British corvette called the Polyanthus that was sunk, right? So the survivors, another ship took on, it was St. Croix, as a matter of fact, Canadian destroyer, took on survivors. The next day, the St. Croix was sunk. So a British destroyer took on survivors. The next day, the British destroyer was sunk, and a civilian ship took on survivors. There was 2 left, but 3 ships. Anyway, another thing I was going to talk about is starting during World War II, we started putting a maple leaf on the funnel on our Canadian ships. We initially used the green maple leaf, you know, like the actual leaf, and later on, which we still have today, we use the red one. And a couple of younger people have asked me, well, how come you didn't use a red maple leaf? I said, you mean like on the flag? Well, yeah. Well, we didn't have that flag back then. We had the red ensign back then here in Canada. As a matter of fact, in the Navy, we didn't use that either. We used the white ensign, like the British. Now, I was talking to you about, historically we used that, and I was talking to you about when we went to the green uniforms and all the rest of it, then we used the Canadian flag. Now, since then, we've gone back to the Royal Canadian Navy, we've gone back to a white ensign, but the white ensign now is a little different, because in the corner, instead of the Union Jack, it has the Canadian flag. So, that's what we're doing. This gun here, way back in 1910, they formed the Royal Canadian Navy. That's when it started. So we got 2 old, kind of worn out, hand-me-down ships from the British to train on and learn on and whatever. And one of them became HMCS Niobe. This gun is off. We're gonna hang on. But ASDIC and whatever, this is an actual ASDIC set here. And I didn't mention it before, but if you're interested, there's a movie. It's based on a book. I have the book as well. If you ever get a chance to watch it or whatever, if you want to see, and it's very authentic, whatever, it's very, very well done. It's about British corvette at sea on the convoys during World War II and whatever. And on the movie, there's 2 different ships. The second one's a frigate. And if you watch closely, you'll see a guy working a set just like this.
What was the movie called?
Cruel Sea. Anyway, if you want to walk over here, I was talking about women in the Navy. I'm sure that's not how it worked, but anyway, I say that anyway. And then if we back up a little bit over here, all these pictures here, this is present day. So of course, all those restrictions I talk about are all gone. If you're a woman, you join the Navy, you can do any job you want.
A specific date? That is
Anything you want.
no. I mean that is a specific date in the calendar, or based
Well,
on the
no,
captain
if you
decision?
join the Navy as a woman, you can train in any different kind of trade, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I got it.
Yeah, there's no restrictions on women anymore, so, yeah. The last restriction they had, and I don't know if that's still in, was submarines, because there's no privacy, it's very small, very cramped, it's hard to, you know, deal with that, but I believe that's going to. Life in the Navy was pretty rough, so you get a free drink every day.
Free drink?
No, just a
Just a
drink.
drink, not-
They
not-
call it a tot, which was you know, like a shot or a couple ounces or something. Yeah, that's the official.
Royal Canadian Navy. Captain Morgan.
A little different. This is actually an escort carrier. And at the beginning of World War II, the British Navy had half a dozen carriers, and they were right at the beginning of the war. They sent one out on a mission with 7 destroyers protecting it, right? Because it's a valuable ship. And this is when they had a shortage of ships. Well, somehow a submarine got in, put a torpedo, it sank it. So now you lost a very expensive ship, a whole bunch of aircraft, a bunch of trained sailors. You can't afford losses like this. So they're very careful after that where they use their aircraft carriers. So what happened was later on, the first one of these, this is an escort carrier. This is very small, much, much smaller than your regular. Only carries 6 airplanes. What they did was, the first one actually was done from a captured German merchant ship. They basically cut the top off, put a little landing strip on it, and made it into an aircraft carrier, right? So I was saying this carrier only carries 6 airplanes. And all these airplanes sitting here, that would have never happened. What happened was, you'd land an aircraft, you'd come down, go down here, this little square there, that's an elevator. You'd fold up the wings, put it on there, put it away, then the next airplane could come in, right? So it was kind of limited to what you could do. But I was watching a show about World War II, and they were interviewing a pilot that flew off of one of these, and he was saying every morning they sent up 2 aircraft. One would go this way, one would go that way. You go looking for submarines, right? Because they're up, they can better view to see submarines from a long way away. If they found a submarine, they immediately port back, whatever, and you know, they deal with it, whatever. But these were quite useful because they were relatively easy to make. They were cheap, and the idea was, if this one gets sunk, we'll make another one. So a couple of them did get sunk, but anyway, the HMS Puncher and the HMS Nabob, they're both British ships, but they were manned by Canadian crews. So that was our first experience in naval aviation. And what happened was, beginning of the war, anybody who was a professional sailor in the Royal Canadian Navy was a very serious person, and Corvettes and whatever, a whole bunch of guys joined. They were maybe a little less serious there because there was a war on or whatever. So what they ended up doing, some of them did up artwork like that, which went on the side of the 4-inch gun in a Corvette. And that's an actual one that was on a Corvette. And Disney characters were quite popular in that. The one I liked best was all the Corvettes I was telling you were named after smaller towns and cities in Canada. And there was one called the Wetaskiwin, that's a little town in Alberta, right? So what they had a picture, and I have a book, I have all this stuff. They had a picture of a lady in a long dress with a queen's crown, but she'd kind of fallen down and got her rear end in a puddle. So it's wet ass queen. The other one I liked was, there's a little, you get it now.
Yeah.
There's a little town in Nova Scotia called Bedeck. So what they had a picture of 5 playing cards. They're all 5 aces. That's a bad deck, there's too many aces, right? Anyway, that's some of the stuff they did during the war. And this is just a guy's box with all his personal stuff here, and some of his paperwork, things that he might have during the war. And here's a sailor steering the ship, right? So you figure this guy's up at the top of the ship looking out the window, right? Seeing where they're going? No, this is a naval ship, so he would be in the quartermaster's cabin, very deep in the ship. He can't see where he's going. The reason why they do that in a naval ship, if the ship gets attacked and shot at, if this guy's position is eliminated, the ship is not under control anymore. So what they would do is the officers and everybody up on the bridge, they had what they call voice pipes back then. It looked like a metal funnel and a little pipe going down below to him, and they would yell into the pipe what the order was, and he would steer off with a compass here, or we don't have it right now, we'd have an engine room telegraph he would ring to send the orders down to the engine room. Full ahead, half ahead, full stern, you know, wherever you're going, and all your steering orders and whatever. And that's how they do it, the Navy.
You hoped all the cables were still working.
Yes, yes. I had one one situation where they didn't work and it went bad. And they're putting a game vessel up on the beach. But anyway.
Better a beach than a rock.
Yeah, I mean, it was a soft landing, it was all mud, like even the little glass dome for the depth sounder was not even damaged, so that was good. The British were saying, you know, we're having trouble here with this, so they said, okay, we'll take this one back. So we ended up with HMCS Magnificent, and that worked out a lot better. We had propeller aircraft on it, whatever, worked out fairly good. We got a lot of experience with naval aviation, whatever, and that was in the late 40s, 1950s. If you look on YouTube, there's a really, just put HMCS Magnificent, there's a really good video of the Magnificent at sea landing and taking off aircraft. So anyway, it came on to the 1950s, so of course the move away from propeller aircraft to jet aircraft, right? So we went to the British again and said, well, you know, Magnificent was too small to land a jet aircraft. So they said to us, we'll finish this one, we'll modernize it, we'll upgrade it, we'll modify it, and it became HMCS Bonaventure. Notice the angled flight deck? So that problem with landing the aircraft, you can land a bunch of aircraft, move them up to the front, you can still land another aircraft, right? Because the biggest thing is when you're landing an aircraft, if you're familiar with doing you're landing, of course, on a very short thing, the airplane has a tail hook, right? See those little black wires there? Well, what you want to do is the airplane snags the hook to stop the plane so it doesn't go off the end, right? But if you're coming down and you somehow, for some reason, you get your landing wrong, you don't snag it up, put the power back on, go back up, go around again, right? Just in case there's a problem. Anyway, so that's the Bonaventure. There's a couple of excellent videos on YouTube. There's one of the Bonaventure at sea in 1957. You can see them taking off and landing propeller aircraft, helicopters, and a jet aircraft that we had on the Bonaventure. It's very well done. Now,
Elevator as well there?
yes. See, it's off to the side from the Rainbow. Then they retired them. We had 3 Oberon class. They're British boats, diesel electric boats. They're quite good. And a number of years ago, we bought these 4 Victoria class from the British, and they have been not very good.
That's the ones that they were being decommissioned and we bought, right? From the British?
Yeah, but they spent more of their time not working than working, unfortunately. They're not very good. And we didn't get our money's worth that time. But in particular, this is the pictures over here. Now this is a Canadian Tribal class destroyer in the Korean War. So here's a gun just like this. See the barrel's pointing this way, right? Here's a bunch of guys loading the shells. They weigh 35 pounds each. And here's a map of Winnipeg, and here we are at Chippewa downtown, right? Here's the perimeter highway, it goes around Winnipeg, right? You know, Assiniboine Downs is over here in the Red River Rex. We could hit it from here with this gun. And when I say it's a 4-inch gun, what that means is the barrel is 4 inches wide and the shell's 4 inches wide, right? So, just as a comparison, if we look over here, now this is a Canadian, this is a supply ship, right? This is basically like a tanker. Now, this is a protector. Now, one of the jobs she did was the first Gulf War, Canada sent 2 destroyers and a protector supply ship to the Gulf, whatever, to check incoming ships coming for, war material going to Iraq, whatever. And you see the picture in the back there? That's the protector. And the ship next to it is a U.S. battleship. That's a World War II battleship. They brought it back into service. And basically what they used it for was basically a floating gun platform. If there's anything happening inshore the Army is having trouble with, those are 16-inch guns. So they're good for 35 miles. So it gives you an idea of relative sizes. Because he looked at her sister ship, Preserver, and apparently like her hull in places was so thin because of rust, because she's been 50 years at sea. But so what they ended up doing actually is they were kind of scrambling a little bit, but they ended up going to Chile, and they had a ship which they built in Germany that they didn't need anymore and whatever, and they converted it into a supply ship, and it's the MV Asterisks. It's actually not an HMCS because they have civilian workers. It's like a sort of a rental leasing arrangement. They had civilian workers and Navy guys on board, but they've been using that. And apparently now they're working on our new replacement supply ships, which will be coming out whenever they get out. But anyway, so that's the story about the protector. It's got here, you close that all up because you try to keep the seawater off it when you're at sea, right? You can close the things in the front there, keep the rust off it, whatever. We used to have this gun facing the other way, and they built that apartment block over there.
Oh.
And apparently somebody called the ship's office one day and said, "Your gun's pointing at my apartment." So they said, "Okay, we'll turn it around." It was a little nervous, I guess. But interesting because a friend of mine who he was in he served as a he commanded on the forward guns, and that was his job. They usually use the boardroom for our stuff we're doing in the museum and whatever. And one of the guys, anyway.